Hello and welcome to the Triple B podcast. We are the Buds, Bustin' Balls. I am Bauer Tendo, your intro host tonight. I am the man with the beard, the man behind the beard. This is Celiac_Matt, and he has the most evil mustache in all the world. And this here is a man that once blew himself, but you'll never know about that, will you? Today, we're going to talk about how we got into pro wrestling and what keeps us coming back for more. But first, what are the buds playing and what are they drinking? We got to do this. So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. What are you playing? What are you drinking?
I have been playing Final Fantasy 16 and I freaking love it. It's not turn-based. It's just a glorified hack and slash with Final Fantasy over the top weebiness in this sort of like fantasy medieval setting, and it's stupendous and I love it and I'm having a great time with the side of No Man's Sky. Been vibing with that again as well. So that's what I've been jamming with.
I saw you play No Man's Sky.
You did.
I have a fun fact about that after well, I guess now, because we're talking about wrestling tonight. They added FSR for the Switch version and made it actually look good.
It looks good.
Like the AI upscaling thing that they've been people have wanted for years now. So fun stuff. Great. So I might actually try that.
I got the PS5 upgrade for free on my PS4 disc, and it is stupendous.
Controller options are cool on that.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
All right.
Whoa. We never talked about what Matt's drinking.
I was waiting for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
we're doing two for tonight, baby.
All right, we're going back to back. I'm having water is what I'm having today. So let's have a nice tasty sip.
Because Matt, he's always drinking on camera. Water.
I hope
hydrated.
I hope everybody enjoyed that close up in the previous episode as much as I did.
I know I did.
And Scott, what are you playing and what are you drinking?
I'm playing the same exact stuff I was playing last week, although I'm a lot more salty with it and getting ready to bail on it. So that would be Diablo 4. I had this great idea of I'm going to marathon this game during the bonus experience weekend, get from level 81 to 100. I ended up getting to level 85. Got me very grumpy. Also still playing Slay the Spire, which is also getting me super grumpy because I cannot beat that game, really beat that game with the defect. And 95% of the people listening to this doesn't know what that means. Whatever. But it is infuriating me.
I know that pain.
Actually, I think I may pull it off, and I literally was doing it right before the start. I was like, I can finally beat... Oh, I have 5 minutes to go until the podcast. All right. So I'll probably get my heart broken as soon as we're done filming this. Anyway, for what I'm drinking, I am drinking a crisp, clear, well, not really that clear, sparkling ice. The strawberry kiwi flavor. Zero sugar, full of antioxidants. Refreshing.
Anytime I hear the word ice now, anytime, anywhere, any context, I hear it in Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze's voice.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
It's ice to meet you. Anytime I see the word ice, it's not like ice. It's ice, blah, blah, with extra syllables of hymns, blah, 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 all over the place.
I'm to put you on ice.
Cool potty.
Stupendous.
That's
Stupendous.
Great.
What about you, Mike?
I am wrapping up Spider-Man Remastered. I'm about to get a plat on the main story. I'll get a plat on the DLC because it's pretty easy to get. I'm just going through the DLC just to go through the motions because the DLC is absolutely awful, as we discussed in an earlier episode, which if you haven't watched, you should go watch that. But I'm doing that in Sea of Stars still. So good stuff. My son has recently gotten into Overwatch 2, so I'll be playing that with him, putting aside my anger with Blizzard in the Overwatch team. And I am drinking a cold brew tonight, but tonight I'm drinking it from a black shoe.
You changed it up. He's drinking from a shoe.
A cold brew shoe.
Cold
Maybe
brew shoe.
I'll make that a thing. There was a Bob's Burgers episode where she made wine shoes. Maybe I'll make
I was
cold
going to
brew shoes.
reference that.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, so maybe that's what we'll do. Anyway, tonight it's all about wrestling, baby. So we're talking about wrestling, and Scott, you're gonna lead us off on this one. So tee us off, man. Let's go.
There you go. Hopefully, Mike saying that tonight's episode is about wrestling didn't scare away half of our viewers. So for those of you who are still here listening, thank you. But yes, we are talking about wrestling tonight. One of the things that we discussed that we want to do with this season of the former Gamecast is broaden the subjects to non-gaming related topics. We'll still talk about some games, but spice it up. And to be honest, if there's one thing we talk more about throughout the week than video games, it's wrestling. We are all very big wrestling fans. Wrestling has actually played a very fundamental part in keeping us together. We'll talk about that more later. But yeah, so we're going to talk about it, why we're into it, why we keep watching it. Before we get really deep into this, every time I mention to somebody that I'm into wrestling, I always have to start off the same way, and I'm going to start off the same way with you guys. Yes, we are aware that wrestling is fake. So, here's the thing about wrestling. The outcomes are predetermined. A lot of what happens in the actual match is actually called on the spot and improvised. Wrestling moves are designed to look the most painful as possible, and at the same time actually inflicting the least amount of pain to their opponent, because it's about protecting the other guy, putting on these cool looking moves. There are larger than life personalities. I really am sad that I forget the wrestler who said this, but they said that a good wrestler is acting like themselves, but with the volume at 10. So you got these larger than life personalities on stage doing these crazy moves. If you think about it, it's just basically a soap opera mixed with ballet, but manly version of it. So, with
Sounds
that
like
said,
Razor Ramon or somebody would have said that.
I've heard Stone Cold say it, and I've heard Chris Jericho say it. Both
okay, so
That makes
major
sense.
icons. Mm-hmm.
there you go. So yeah, so with that, why are we into wrestling? Why do we like it? What keeps us coming back? And I'm going to go and kick it off with me. And I'm going to take you back, way back into the past. Because, humble brag, I think I've been watching wrestling longer than these other two posers in here. That's right. I am the grandpa in the group. But I've actually watched my first wrestling match even way before that. My first experience with wrestling was actually watching intro to a pay-per-view. So what they have is they have these little short half an hour specials before a pay-per-view that are trying to convince you to watch the pay-per-view. Like, or $50, you can watch a Royal Rumble. Look at all these cool matches. I believe I was about 6 years old at the time, and it was for the Royal Rumble. And me being dumb little kid Scott thought the entire time that I was actually about ready to watch the Royal Rumble. All these cool matches they were hyping up. It's like, all right, let's do this. I'm ready to watch this. I don't know who this crazy undead Undertaker dude is, and the Shawn Michaels guy of all these hearts around him, calling himself a sexy boy, but I want to watch this. And then it never showed up. And I actually remember going to my mom saying, like, Mom, can you buy the Royal Rumble for me? What's the Royal Rumble? It's a wrestling event. No. And it's like, oh, okay. So that was kind of my first experience that wrestling was not very welcomed by my parents. Fast forward about 10 years, there's a little era in wrestling called the Attitude Era. And this is probably when wrestling was most mainstream in society. That's when you have characters like Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, Jericho, their heyday. And I remember that I would when none of the parents are at home, I would sneak in, turn on the TV, and see if wrestling happened to be on. I didn't know what time it played. I would just go browse through the channels and hope that I would come across it. One time I lucked out, and I caught the end of an episode. And ironically, it was the main event for SmackDown. And the match was Vince McMahon versus Triple H for the WWF at the time championship, which Vince McMahon won. And background, Vince McMahon, if you are not aware, he's a very old guy, and he is the owner of WWE. And I noticed after the fact that him winning the championship was incredibly controversial. He's known as one of the worst WWF champions of all time. But I didn't know this. I'm just watching this jacked up, horrible dude beating the crap out of this old guy, and he's bleeding everywhere, and his son comes out, Shane McMahon, to save him, and then he just beats the crap out of Shane McMahon. Rinse and repeat. End of the match, Stone Cold Steve Austin comes out, gives a stunner to Vince McMahon, flips him off, goes off, Vince McMahon pins him, and that was literally the coolest thing that like 15-year-old Scott could see. I loved it. I was psyched. Sure enough, kept trying to watch it. This time got a little bold when my parents came over, or we were at home. Nope, as soon as they saw wrestling was on, turn that off. You're not allowed to watch wrestling. So I want to say, one, I was hooked to the personalities, this, larger than life spectacle I was seeing. But it was also a little bit to kind of like, oh, my parents don't want me to watch it? Well, I'm going to watch it. So the really interesting thing, though, wrestling really kind of took off for me and actually became a normalized thing for me because of my friends. So in the lead into, I want to say it was WrestleMania 18, a couple new kids moved on to our street, or the street I was living on. You probably have heard me reference them in previous podcast episodes. Tim and Chris, my friends. And I had no idea they were into wrestling at all when they were playing outside, doing whatever. And they mentioned to me saying like, hey, Scott, are you into wrestling? It's like, am I? We're going to order WrestleMania 18. Do you want to come over and watch it? Do I? And I remembered that I went to my parents and I told them like, I'm going to go over to Tim and Chris's house. That's awesome. You made new friends? Yeah, we're going to watch wrestling. It was being social, but it's watching wrestling.
Too bad, parents.
Yeah, and so obviously we know how that ended up. They relented. They allowed me to go watch WrestleMania at my friend's house. And that was a super amazing, awesome experience. Fast forward a year later, we're up to WrestleMania 19, and I'm super psyched. It's like, yeah, WrestleMania my friend Tim and Chris's house. Day before, they go to me and say, hey, Scott, hope you don't mind, but there's this kid we hang out with at church, and he's into wrestling too, and we invited him over to watch WrestleMania 19. I hope you don't mind. Well, I did mind. I was kind of upset. I'm like, I don't want some weird guy I don't know being there for WrestleMania. This is like a big deal, cool thing. But whatever, they're paying for it. It's their friend. I'll deal with it. Man, do you want to tell everybody who that person was that I met at WrestleMania 19?
Me.
Oh, I thought it was going to be a jerk.
Me. I was invited, and Scott hated it.
I hated. 20 years ago, there we go. The journey of the friendship of Scott and Matt, 20 years, I want to say at this point, started at WrestleMania 19, watching it at Tim and Chris's house. And as Matt said, I was not happy about it. And I actually kind of hated him after it's like, all right, I don't like this guy. He's cheered for all the guys I didn't like. He like rooted for all the people I hated. This guy is a jerk. This guy is a sucker. And I don't want to make this episode too much about me and Matt, but it's actually kind of funny. Like he, a couple weeks after that, he would go and do AIM, send me a message on there. AIM for
what?
Dude, for all you young Zoomers out there.
We're old.
Yeah, think of like Facebook messaging or direct messaging.
Or Discord.
Or Discord. And he sends me a message like, hey, this is Matt. We met at WrestleMania 19. And then I don't know what the hell he asked me. Like, hey, what games do you play? What music do you like? I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to talk to this guy. But he was relentless. He was persistent. And I don't even know. Maybe he like did some type of mind Jedi trick to me. And 20 years later, here we are still talking. But wrestling is not just a way that Matt and Scott came together. It's also a way that me and Mike came together. And I think I'll leave that story for Mike. I won't go and cut to that. But kind of a really cool thing that that's the origin of me getting into wrestling, kind of a taboo thing, and got normalized through my friends. Why I keep coming back to wrestling? There's two aspects to it. One thing, if you know me at all, you would really know that I'm really into superhero movies. I would say comic books, but I actually almost never have read any comic books in my life. But I love superhero movies. I know.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Wrestling is a more believable comic book or superhero movie, if you want to put it. It's based, they can't fire lasers, well, unless you're like the Undertaker. You can't fly around. But you know what? You're jacked up dudes. You're solving all your problems with fist fights. your larger in life personalities. It's a spectacle. And in a lot of ways, it really reminds me of your classic superhero movie, but in a more relatable, not every day, but kind of more of approachable, down to earth way. I would say the biggest reason though why I continue to keep watching wrestling and I'm still into it, going back to the beginning, it's about my friends. One of the very cool things that I've had the privilege of doing now that I'm older and I'm not, a poor kid, is I've had the privilege of being able to travel around the country, travel throughout the state I live in, and see various wrestling shows with my friends. So Mike here, we actually saw a couple of wrestling shows together this year. Ring of Honor, Super Card of Honor, and then a really cool indie show, and an Impact Wrestling show. Matt, I've actually saw a couple shows with him in Chicago. We have in Tennessee. Yeah, Tennessee. So we saw the NWA 65-year anniversary show, Tennessee. We saw the very first ever AEW All Out in Chicago, an incredible experience. And this is something that I've really appreciated, especially as I'm starting to get up there in years, is having these common interests with my friends. There's not very many bands like, hey, buddy, do you want to go out and see Elton John? I don't like Elton John. Hey, how about we go out and do this or that? But wrestling's like, yeah, we'll go see the wrestling pay-per-view. It's just a good opportunity to go out there with your buddies, enjoy a show, not worry about anything else, and, take in the moment. And honestly, it's something that I have very much appreciated and I very much love. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I am into wrestling. How about if you go and take it away, Matt?
Before Matt takes it away, I have to point out that Elton John comment. And can you imagine an Elton John wrestler? So like he's out there in the thing and he plays a piano on the mat. Are you serious?
I mean, you have Delton Castle, which is basically Elton John
but he doesn't
minus
play the
piano.
Yeah, like
piano's
the piano's got to be part of it,
okay.
right? Like
he's a good painter.
What's that?
He is a good painter. He paints on Twitch.
Oh, Castle?
Things like that. Yeah, he's very good.
I can believe that. 100%. Anyway, take it away, Matt.
Yeah, the Elton John comment got Mike's slight fury there. He had to talk about it just a little bit. So essentially what we're talking about are 3 points here: how we got into wrestling, why it appeals to us, and what keeps us coming back. And Scott kind of talked a little on my origin story. Like, I saw snippets of wrestling as a kid, but I was never allowed to. I grew up in a very, very conservative Christian household, which means a lot of stuff I was banned from, like Harry Potter, believe it or not, Power Rangers, Barney the dinosaur. Again, I think that's just because it pissed my dad off more than anything. And wrestling was one of them. Now, as people grow up and evolve a little bit, they're like, yeah, that is a fictional thing. Who cares? Let my child watch it. But they didn't let me watch wrestling. And the reason they let me watch wrestling initially is the same reason that your parents let you go to our friend's house. Well, your friends at the time's house, because they're like, oh, you're new and you have someone that invited you over. Oh, it's wrestling. Fine, go. So that's what happened to me. I was invited to our friend Tim and Chris's house to watch WrestleMania 19. The year was 2003. This is 20 years ago. 20 years ago. So this was 14-year-old Matt. I think 13 whenever WrestleMania airs. So I was 13 or 14. And I was invited to watch WrestleMania 19. I have never seen a full wrestling event in my life. And it blew me away. The characters, the flash, the pyro, the matches themselves, and naive little Matt was basically like, yay, cheer for the good guys, boo the bad guys, go Hulk Hogan, boo Vince McMahon. Like, that's pretty much what I went in initially, but I still had a great time, and it was nice watching it with friends. And after that day, my parents said, you can watch wrestling. And we only had the free TV, right? So the basic channels, like 2 through 13, essentially. And at that time on channel 13 where I lived, I think it was called UPN, we would get Thursday Night SmackDown. I would watch that show religiously. I would tape it and rewatch it 5 times the next day. Wrestling became an all-consuming thing. And looking back retrospectively, while I have not paid the money to officially diagnose myself with ADHD, because that's how healthcare works here, I am positive that I have it. And one of the symptoms of it, if you will, is hyperfixation. My entire personality, my life, every second, all I thought about was pro wrestling. it just consumed me. I was in class making my pencils wrestle each other. I was thinking up storylines and wrestling moves and things like that, going to wrestling message boards. I got into wrestling just because of the spectacle, and my brain just said, everything else that you like, disregard. Wrestling is all you care about. And I had friends that were pretty similar as well. It was nice talking to them about it. So having like-minded friends really helped me want to keep watching, and that's how I got into it. What it really what wrestling really does to appeal to me is, like I said earlier, it used to just be yay, good guys, boo, bad guys. It's like any film or TV show. You have your protagonist that you're rooting for, but you have to have a villain to knock them down and have them overcome something. So there's this basic storytelling in really any form of medium, including real life. So that's how it started out for me. But what appeals to me as I get older is just why I enjoy wrestling. It's less like, yeah, I want my guy to win. Like, you still do. You always are going to have your favorites in wrestling, even when your favorite is a bad guy. Like, take Chris Jericho, for example, arguably the greatest of all time, one of the best wrestlers of all time. Most of his career, he was a heel, aka a bad guy. No matter what, I was cheering for Chris Jericho just because I liked him. Even though he's a bad guy, I wanted him to win. And wrestling has such this wide a range of characters that you're always going to find somebody that you like. And one of the things that happened recently is I do watch alongs with my Twitch community, not on Twitch because not allowed to do that, but I do watch alongs with my Twitch community where I introduce them to wrestling and watch these big AEW shows with them. And I get a lot of people that don't watch wrestling that are asking me questions. They're engaged. The most recent show that they just had, which was All Out, I had a guy who knew who Orange Cassidy was because he has transcended wrestling and made it into like the public domain, if you will. And he's like, I want to see this Orange Cassidy guy. I've seen memes and GIFs and things of him. I want to see him. I'm like, yeah, you do. So just talking about that was cool, just to have all these characters that you can root for whatever reason it is. I also like the storytelling. Like, I don't just mean like guy overcomes evil. There is storytelling in the matches itself. You wouldn't think that, but every single match, it's not, I do a cool move. Now you do a cool move. Now I win. There are these moves and sequences and pauses and looking at the camera, looking at the crowd, letting the crowd breathe. They tell a story with their movements, with their actions. It's essentially a live in front of you fight scene. You watch a cool kung fu movie or something like The Protector, which is dope. They film those things for hours and days and weeks on end. Wrestling, they do it in one take like that. Just the feat of it is so impressive. And I love to see how they get to the finish, how they plan the finishes, how they build to it. They're painting a picture essentially. And that's why I like it. So it used to be like, yay, go Hulk Hogan. Now it's like, hey, go Jericho because you're cool. But also, how are you going to finish this? Where is this going? That was a cool move. Listen to that crowd pop. And that is one of the biggest things that appeals to me is listening to the crowd. The crowd at a wrestling show is you, is the audience. They are telling you what is happening, if something's good, funny, bad, sad. And just being a part of that is great. And I'm glad Scott mentioned the shows. I think Mike might mention some shows as well. But going to those shows, being a part of that crowd, seeing it live in front of you is like something you've never seen before. Even if you don't like wrestling, never seen wrestling, go to a local show. Go to a big show, go to a wrestling show and just be there and see it. There is nothing else in the world like it. It is a blast. And what keeps me coming back? What keeps me coming back is the brotherhood of wrestling fans. A lot of wrestling fans, the loud ones, are kind of the worst. They really are. But
Looking
if
at
you
you,
find
New York.
New York, but if you have some like-minded friends and people that you interact with that are all watching wrestling together, like I have a sub channel in my Discord dedicated to wrestling where we're talking all the time. Like, what do you think they're doing here? That was a great match. Check out this tweet. Check out this GIF. Even though I don't watch WWE because I'm an AEW guy and I think WWE kind of sucks, irrelevant to this conversation at the moment, they share stuff with me about it. I just like talking about it. So what keeps me there is one, I still appreciate the art form, and it is an art form. If anyone ever says it's not an art form, they are wrong. They have eaten bricks as a child. I don't know what's wrong with them. It is an art form. They are telling a story via violence, essentially, but it's a live action fight scene. And I just love to see how they put it together. And what appeals to me the most is you can tell when someone's good at their job just like anywhere else. You can say that guy's a bad actor, that guy's a good actor. You can see that with these wrestlers, those that are the best above and beyond. Like there's a Chris Jericho versus a random name who he was over, but probably not a good wrestler, Gene Snitsky. If you put them in the ring, you'd be like, all right, Snitsky's there, but Jericho, that guy is really good. What is he doing to get the crowd into this? Why is he so over? Why are they making millions of dollars? It is just a lot of fun for me. So I started back 2003, WrestleMania 19, met Scott, friendship cemented to this day, 20 years later. Mike eventually joined in because we used to invite him to pay-per-views. And he used to like it for different reasons. He'll tell you why. But we invited him and a bunch of random people. It was just fun talking to them and seeing new people and just make friends. And it's just a blast for me. So I got a little more rambly than I was wanting to, even with my notes. But as you can tell, I'm a huge wrestling fan. I love wrestling. We do watch alongs with my Discord community, and I love getting new people into it. You should join us. Talk with us, because wrestling is the greatest. I will now pass the WRASSLIN baton. I'm going to hot tag Mike in right now. Mike, tell me about WRASSLIN.
Oh boy. So these two have already talked. I mean, you're going to see a theme with all of the stuff, why it appeals to us and why it keeps coming back. There are just slight little differences in details, and I think, honestly, we all share those little slight differences in details as well. It's just what we focus on, what we hone in on. So for me, I didn't come from the Christian household, the super Christian restrictive household. I could have watched wrestling all the time, and I did watch wrestling as a young kid, and then I just stopped because I was a kid, and unlike the benefit of the modern era where you could just be like, there's a thing, it's online, I can watch it whenever I want. I can pause it, I can come back later. We didn't have that luxury. It's on, you watch it when it's on. If you miss it, too bad. Maybe it comes out on VHS. Remember those? So I just kind of fell out of wrestling. It wasn't that I didn't like it, I just stopped. Then years and years later, these two, along with our Get Your Head in the Game brothers, kept inviting me. Like, you should come watch wrestling with us. You should come watch wrestling with us. Just like regular shows, the weekly shows, whatever. You should watch wrestling. I'm like, no. I wasn't really into it. And then they invited me to a pay-per-view. And I went, fine. You know what? I'm going to go there. I'm going to hang out with my friends. This will be fun, right? It's just something on in the background. I'm here to just have fun and hang out with my friends. And by the end of that night, I was sitting on a couch. It was at the Rushing's house, and I was watching. And I was like, wow, this is fun. This is entertaining. We went through, I think it was a couple pay-per-views, and I liked it better, but I was definitely not a wrestling fan. Not yet. And looking back on why I became a wrestling fan is so stupid, but I have a point in telling this story. So, there was a pay-per-view that happened. Well, let me rewind it a little bit here. First, we were watching, I don't know, it was like a Raw or a SmackDown, probably a SmackDown, honestly. We were watching just a regular weekly show with WWE, and this dude comes out in this big old onesie, and he is not, I don't know if I'd call him a fat guy, but he definitely wasn't fit. And he wasn't like the, typical buff wrestler. And he comes out with this like faux mohawk thing going on in a onesie with these two really good looking women dancing and shaking their butts around to each side of him to this, I guess you could call it funk intro music. And I had no words. This guy's name was Funkasaurus. And his two beautiful lady friends were the Funkadactyls. And I thought that was the stupidest, most stupendous thing in the entire world at that time. Like, that was high art for me. It was so funny. And he came down, looking back on it, he didn't wrestle well. It wasn't a good match. But I didn't care. Because I was entertained. I was this close this close to becoming a wrestling fan. And Matt, I think you have something to chime in on this as you turned on your mic.
I did because I remember similar to how Scott hated me initially. I didn't. We were friends at the time, but I hated so much that what got you over with wrestling, that final little bit, was the freaking Funkasaurus and the Funkadactyls. It filled me with so much rage and fury that, like, why can't he like a good thing that's going on? And just a side point on that, I'm going to eat those words now retrospectively, is wrestling has something for everybody. If you want to see a guy do 3 moonsaults or front flips in the air into a burning table, they got that. If you want to see someone that looks like they're just punching the hell out of each other, brutal, they got that. You want to see someone climb a ladder and get knocked off the ladder? You want to see someone just cut a promo, like this scathing villain promo that you're just like, dang, that's really good. There's a little bit of everything in wrestling. There's always something that draws somebody, and they need the goofy, they need the gimmick. So retrospectively, I'm sorry for how mad I got, but I just needed to be clear. I was so angry that that's what got you.
Yeah, I think the big point to take from that is there's no wrong way to like wrestling. There really isn't. Like, whatever brings you into wrestling to watch it, that's the right way to watch it.
And kudos to you guys, because I didn't know that. I'm pretty certain Scott felt the same way, but I didn't know that you hated that until way later, Matt, when you told me, and I went, yeah, I can understand that. I get it, you know. So you kind of, you know, basically you kept your mouth shut, right? You went, the meme of the person holding the person's lips and saying, let people enjoy things, right? Like, that is very true. And
That's what I needed.
That kept me in, right? But that wasn't the final straw. I have a note in my notes here that says Funky Time seals the deal. Oh, good Lord. So then another pay-per-view happened, and this was a bigger pay-per-view. I don't think, was it a WrestleMania?
It was WrestleMania.
It was a WrestleMania. And Funkasaurus was coming down, but he didn't have the Funkadactyls this time. He had a bunch of grandmas out there shaking their asses to his intro theme, and he's walking out just strutting like he's like super cool. And I was cackling. I had tears in my eyes. I couldn't breathe. And it was like it was an overload of just, what is this stupidity? And how did I live without it? It was so stupid. I don't even remember the match. I don't even remember who he went against. Probably was bad. Probably not a good match. Or do you remember, Scott?
This is the funny thing. He didn't have a match. He literally just came out, and then he's just like, so a little background. His theme, like his catchphrase was like, somebody called my mama or something like that. And so he's like, hey, I'm always talking about my mama. Do you want to see her? I have a bunch of mamas. And yes, a bunch of ladies in old women suits, like very, come out, and they just start like shaking it everywhere. And you just see that for a couple minutes, and then that's over. He heads back to the back. That was literally it. It wasn't even a wrestling match. That's what got Mike.
And I hope that you listener, you viewer, take the time to go look up this video. Go look at this thing. It's WrestleMania, Funkasaurus, old ladies. Search for that. You'll find it. And I had, oh man, it's just too much. And that's what's something stupid. It wasn't the flashiness. It wasn't all the other things. Those were cool. But that's not what got me into it. It was the stupidity of it. Now, as I've watched since then, so that was like, what, 2008? 2009? Something like that. It was like early-ish 2000s, right?
I'll say the 2010s is my guess, but...
Yeah, well, because I would say it was before that, because I proposed to my wife in 2010, and it was well before that. I knew you guys well before Chelsea.
And I was still living at home, so it
yeah,
had to be
so
like 8 or 9.
Yeah, I think it was like 8 or 9. So, I mean, I've been watching wrestling now for well over a decade, and my tastes have changed, as all of ours has. Some things stay the same, a lot of things don't. So what appeals to me about wrestling is... so there are stories told in the ring, and there are stories told outside the ring. There are story arcs. There are whatever you want to call it. And what I mean by that is the stories outside the ring. So if you don't know anything, maybe you do know something, a good story outside the ring. A good example is in AEW right now with wrestlers MJF and Adam Cole. They were enemies. MJF was a super heel. Not going to go into that. Awesome, but not going to go into it. And they got forced to tag up, to team up. And over months, they've developed a friendship in this storyline that feels like a legitimate friendship. And so there's that story, the story outside the ring. I love those. Those are clinchers, but that's not actually what I'm looking for now when I watch wrestling. I'm looking for the stories told inside the ring that could lead to outside stuff. The stories told inside the ring can range from an actual storyline of, like, ooh, boy, these two people have bad blood, and this match is like they're fine. Let's just beat the hell out of each other, and whoever wins, that's it, and we drop it, right? It could be literally a story of, hey, last week, I won't go into that because, you know what? Spoilers. I don't care. You should watch wrestling up to date anyway. So Orange Cassidy losing the title to Jon Moxley. Well, he had wrestled pretty much every week, and his reign was like 300 and something days. It was like almost a full year that he had this title, and he wrestled almost every week. He did a lot. He did work, okay? He did work. His body wore down. So the story inside the ring in that match was, my arm is busted up, my neck is really busted up, my leg is really busted up. And so these wrestlers play on that, like, oh, my leg, like those are the stories they tell. So then Moxley goes, well, I'm going to just hammer on that leg because I know if I do, you're less likely to get back up. I love that. The continuity, the stories told inside the ring when somebody pops up at a 2 count. That's what appeals to me now, is the stories told there that could lead to other things. And I've also come to appreciate, my wife and I were just talking about this the other night, even just normal, quote unquote, normal wrestling moves, like a clothesline or, just something simple, suplex, which is crazy. As I've gotten older and my body hurts more, and even though I work out every day, I still hurt. I'm just getting older, and I see these people doing this stuff, and I think, wow, how do you do this? Like, you really do train and practice this stuff all the time. This is your craft. This is art in a not up on the wall kind of way, picture. And another thing I appreciate, and Scott maybe eventually will appreciate this if he ever streams, and Matt will definitely appreciate this. For those that don't watch, maybe you're not familiar with wrestling, maybe you're super into Twitch streams, maybe you're into watching YouTube videos like this, maybe you're into podcasts, streaming stuff, right? The live stuff, they're doing this live. This is like a Twitch stream, but physical. And when they mess up, they can't go, oh, shoot, do a funny little, it's a big deal. So they have to be perfect. They have to be on top of it when they make a mistake. And that's kind of the beauty of like bands, like going to a concert, things like that. Like if they mess up, they catch it and they move on, right? Like that's like, oh, I heard that, or, oh, maybe you didn't hear it. This is live. That is a feat, man. And I respect that. Like, to put on even a 10-minute match, being that physical and not screw up, not get somebody else hurt, not get yourself hurt, man, let me tell you. And then what keeps me coming back is, again, it's the friendships. It's being able to talk about this stuff, whether we agree with it, whether we don't agree with it, what we like, what we don't like, wrestlers that we like. And it's kind of funny that the three of us I feel like a lot of our favorite wrestlers are very similar, just in different orders. Like a lot of the same are there, but maybe in different orders or different categories or however you do it. But it's just fun sharing that like moment. I love in a pay-per-view when something crazy happens and I look down at chat and I just see all caps, holy shit. And I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw that, like, whoa, and even there was one time Scott came down, he watched a pay-per-view. We drank a little bit of the bubbly at that time. He brought that as the gift. And, it's just fun watching that stuff. Even if it's a bad show, it's never a bad show. You still have fun. And maybe your good time is trashing on the show itself, like, that wasn't good booking, whatever. It still brings you together. And in addition to that, I get to something that really appeals to me and brings me back is I get to share this with my wife. My wife is into really into wrestling now. She got me this hat. She got me an FTR hat. For Father's Day, she got me Top Guys back here. And she now has a Britt Baker shirt. She just got a Willow Nightingale shirt. She watches Collision with me every week. She watches Dynamite with me every week. I get to share that with her. And it's just something like we get to enjoy together. And so that's what appeals to me and keeps me coming back is, I know fandoms can be really bad, any fandom, but somehow wrestling just like brings you together. And I do want to throw out, I literally threw this in right at the end because both Matt and Scott talked about this. They had seen shows when they were younger. They saw live shows when they were younger. I am 30. I was 37 when I saw this. 37 when I saw my first live wrestling show, and I saw 3 of them in a row, like back to back. Holy hell, go watch a show. Go watch a show. I wouldn't even say like the big ones. Like the least favorite of the 3 we saw was the biggest one, which was the Ring of Honor, which ended up being okay by the end. The 2 little indie shows that were in the same venue back to back, they literally kicked us out and we walked back in. I can't. Some wrestlers in those shows are now wrestling in AEW, and I'm like the biggest fans of them. I mean, I'm going to tell you every week, every time I see Aussie Open, I have to put it in the chat. Hey, Aussie Open appreciation tweet or post here. Like, I love those guys. Seeing them live and all the little things they did. Go see a live show. Even if you're not into wrestling, you will go there. You will have a good time. You will.
I have 2 things I have to address. Is one, I relate to watching with your spouse because when I was dating my wife, like she always, was aware and liked wrestling, but she and her friend loved The Undertaker. And I had an Undertaker DVD that I would loan to them over and over and over. They would just keep watching and watching and watching. It was just that was a really cool moment. And I still watch with my wife, which is great. I relate to that very hard. I do want to talk about how I think wrestling, out of any other form of entertainment and medium, is the easiest to talk about in real time as it's happening. Like you could be watching a sport like football or baseball. They're like, oh, that's a strike. Yes. Or it's like, did you see that spot? What do you think they're going to do at the next spot? Ooh, what do you think about that? What about that promo last week? Like as it's happening in real time, it is like the most engaged I am on like Twitter and things like that. I'm like, I'm watching this. What do you think? Oh, I agree with that. I don't think about that. There's so many layers in this community where I just never enjoyed doing that with anything else except for wrestling. And I love that you have actually been to wrestling shows now, Mike. I actually totally forgot that your first wrestling shows was essentially recent. I've been to several, like as a kid, mainly it was WWE stuff. As an adult, I've been to a couple AEW shows. Scott and I went to an NWA show. I've also been to a bunch of independent wrestling shows. Like I've probably been to more independent wrestling shows than you have. I think Scott's been to the most wrestling out of the 3 of us. Actually, it might be me overall, but I've been to a lot of independent shows and I've made friends with professional wrestlers, those that have been on national TV, those that haven't. And they are like the coolest people in the world to meet because they're big, they're strong, they are athletes, but they're also human. And everyone knows wrestling, again, isn't real, but they acknowledge it and embrace it. And they love talking to people that love the art form as well, which is really, really cool. You get to talk to the artist, if you will, after a live show. Like they do a show and maybe they're selling a t-shirt behind the ring when the show's over, and they're talking to anybody and everybody. It's just really cool. It's a really fun community. Ignore the loud ones and things like that. But I just want to address those 2 things because yes, I agree so very much. And I know we're going to start wrapping things up. We're going to our conclusion here. Before I do start wrapping it up, I do see a note here from Scott that just says wrestling poem.
I know. I'm waiting for this thing. I've been eyeballing that, and he has. So, viewer, listener, he also has Scotty Porta Potty rant, and it's blacked out. It's spoiler tagged in our document, and I have not looked at it.
Same.
Yeah. So I'm
proud of you guys.
Yeah, so like we are going into this blind. So what you experience is what we're
Yeah.
gonna experience here, and just it's like wrestling. We're
There we
good. We're doing
go.
this
All right.
live here.
All right. Time for Scott's promo. But yeah, definitely wrestling and poem. You hear that and you don't really think it goes together. But as Matt and Mike have been talking about, wrestling is an art form. It's maybe not art as you think of it, but if you break it down, it is very much art. And a wrestler that I really think that personified the idea of wrestling as art is a wrestler by the name of Windham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt. Even if you're not into wrestling, you have likely maybe heard the name Bray Wyatt recently. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, he did pass away at the age of 36. Um, yeah, heart failure while he was sleeping. And I had the privilege of actually meeting Bray Wyatt many years ago. It was at fan meet and greet the night before WrestleMania, and he was having one of the headlining matches of the event, him versus The Undertaker, which you've heard Matt mention The Undertaker earlier. Huge name in professional wrestling. This was literally like a dream match of myself and a ton of other people. As I'm waiting in line for an hour, I'm thinking to myself, like, what question do I say to him? What do I say to Bray Wyatt? I don't want to be a goober and ask some really stupid thing. When I finally got up there, I settled on not a question, but a statement. I just told him, thank you very much for everything you do and putting your body on the line for our entertainment. I'm super looking forward to your match tomorrow with The Undertaker. I'm so excited for it. And I always remember that he paused for a second and he just gave me this big hearty smile and he said, yeah, man, I'm so excited for that match too. I'm looking forward to it. It's a dream of mine. And I thought that was so cool because there was other wrestlers I met that day at that meet and greet. And you can tell at that point they were pretty jaded. This was just a job for them. Like, oh yeah, just another wrestling match, in and out, get done with. I saw in that moment that, like, I'm not just talking to a wrestler, I'm talking to a wrestling fan. And it was in that moment that I knew that, like, all right, he's the same as me. He's the same as Matt. He's the same as Mike. He's just a guy who saw wrestling as a kid and fell in love with it. And he actually got to go and pursue his dream and do it. So what I want to read to you is a little poem that he wrote. And a little background about this is shortly after he got fired from WWE. This is in the middle of COVID. And I don't know about you, but this was a time period where I was not a very positive person. I hated everything and everyone. And he wrote this poem, a person that had all the reason in the world to be jaded, hate wrestling. He got his dream job, got laid off from it. And this is what he said. Wrestling is not a love story. It's a fairy tale for masochists, a comedy for people who criticize punchlines, a fantasy most can't understand, a spectacle that no one can deny. Lines are blurred, heroes are villains, budgets are cut, business is business. But it can also be a land where dead men walk, where honor makes you elite, where demons run for office, and rock bottom is a reason to rejoice. It's an escape, a reason to point the blame at anyone but yourself for 2 to 3 hours, an excuse to be a kid again, and nothing matters except the moment we are in. Wrestling is not a love story. It's much more. It's hope. In a world surrounded in hate, greed, and violence, a world where closure may never come, we all know a place that has hot and cold hope on tap, for better or worse. And I'm just going to hand it off to Matt after that one. That is why I'm a pro wrestling fan.
This is the part where we move to the brand promotion. I think the best brand promotion we can do is say, we love wrestling. We think you should too. And we would love for you to join our conversations on wrestling. Mike and I have our own respective Discords on our Twitch channels. You can chat wrestling anytime. We're streaming anytime. So we have Mike Bowerman, Bauer Tendo on Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, all of those things. Bauer Tendo, it's the name of where you're watching this YouTube video if you're watching it on YouTube. I am Matt Worsham. I am Celiac Matt, Celiac_Matt on Twitch. I stream 3 days a week. Bauer streams 2. And we got Scott Stevens with us, who will definitely hype his stuff once he is putting stuff out there for you to enjoy, which I guarantee you will enjoy because he's a cool cat. as they say in wrestling. So with that brand promotion and us saying thank you for being here, we're going to move to one of our final segments, which is the viewer question segment.
I heard you had a question. So many questions. Why don't you ask your question and the buds will bust an answer for you.
Segment. We do have links out in our Discords and in these videos where you can submit questions for us and we'd be more than happy to address it. It doesn't have to be gaming, doesn't have to be wrestling. It can be whatever you want as long as it's mostly appropriate. We will answer it. So this is a question from someone that hangs out with Mike and I in our respective Twitch channels. This is Cube. He asked the question. I'm going to quote it here. I'm going to quote his question. He says, would you have unlimited bacon and no games, or unlimited games and no games? I'll repeat. This is what he said. I'll repeat the choices. Would you have unlimited bacon and no games, or unlimited games and no games? I need to address that second one says you can have unlimited games, but also no games. He did this on purpose. I don't know what he's doing. Like, I don't know what you're doing, Cube, with this question. Because if the question was, you can have unlimited bacon and no video games, or unlimited games and like no bacon, I'd be like, we're taking games, very likely. But what are you doing? What is this question? That is my response to it. What do you guys think to this nonsense that Cube is laying down?
Well, first off, if you want unlimited games, all you have to do is pay $14 a month for Game Pass.
Yeah.
There's the segue.
Have you heard the
It's
good
not
news?
that hard. Haha, Scott's Microsoft shilling for tonight. You thought you wouldn't get it with the topic being wrestling. But you know what? To answer the question, I'm going to be the heel here. Wrestling term for the bad guy. I don't like bacon. Bacon is overrated. Bacon is not a food. Bacon is a garnish. Bacon just adds texture to whatever you're eating it on. So you know what? Even if I don't get any games for it, unlimited games and no games, I'll pick that because you know what? I don't like bacon. Not having bacon is a plus for me. There you go. Mic drop.
Ron Swanson would be so disappointed in you. And I just to throw my 2 cents out, I was thinking of Ron Swanson because I feel like Cube phrased it that way. I don't know if you've seen Parks and Rec, but how, like the scene where Chelsea just got to see that for the first time. It's like, bring me all the eggs and bacon that you have here. And the guy starts walking with, no, wait, hold on. I think you heard, bring me a lot of eggs and a lot of bacon. When in fact, I said, bring me all the eggs and bacon that you have in the back. Understood? And I feel like that's what Cube is doing here, I think. I'm not quite sure.
I don't know, but we love Cube. We'll say that.
Yeah.
There's your answer.
I love bacon. Bacon's great. Scott, sorry, you're wrong.
I think bacon's fine. I just hate cooking bacon. It's not fun to cook.
No.
Not a fan.
But do you like making bacon?
Making bacon?
Yes.
So,
yes. All right.
I'd still choose
Moving on.
games. I'd still choose unlimited games.
We choose games over bacon. Yeah, that's obvious. That's a given. So there's a question. So if you guys have a crazy question, a real question, we have a list already that we had to kind of debate what we wanted to choose today. So drop us a question. We'd love to hear it. Add comments on our YouTube, our Discords, our Twitches. You can reach us on Twitter. I think the best way to start the conversation is going to be our YouTube videos personally. Because that's where the video portion of this podcast does reside. So let us know your thoughts on wrestling, if you're a fan, if you're not a fan. And we would love to talk to you about it. You can join our Discord. We can talk wrestling. And we watch wrestling in my Discord as well. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. So we're going to move on to our very final segment. Scott, we have to ask the question, do you have a rant prepared for us today?
Do I have a rant for you guys?
Let's have it. Here we go.
Look over there, he just doesn't care. He's going off on a crowd of people, throwing words in the air like he just don't care. He's yelling at all of us sheeple. It's a Scotty Border Body rant. It's a Scotty Border Body rant. It's a Scotty Border Body rant. It's rant time.
Let me tell you something, potty maniacs. You know what really grinds my gears? douchebags who play bass really loud in their cars driving around town. It's like, what are you doing? Are you just circling around town trying to go and show everybody how cool you are? Look at my bass in my car. I can do the boom, boom, boom. Geez, everybody, aren't I cool? Hey, ladies, aren't you ready to drop your panties for me? You love how deep my bass is. Like, why do you do it? What goes through your mind? Do you think people think you're cool? No, you're a dickhole. You're a douchebag. Everybody thinks that. Why? And who makes this music? Is there some person like doing really deep bass like, yeah, there's some tool out there who's really going to look like a dick driving around with this beat I'm playing together. It's great. Nobody thinks you're cool. You look like a jackass. Stop it. Thank you. God bless the United States of America.
Superb. You heard it here, folks. If your car is rattling with all that bass that you are dropping, Scott says you're a terrible person. Definitely his words, not mine, even though I agree with it. That concludes this episode of the Triple B podcast, the Buds, Bustin' Balls. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Let's talk wrestling. We'll talk probably video game next week. Who knows? We don't just do gaming. We're not just doing wrestling. We're here to look beautiful and talk about things that we like. That's all we can ask for. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. We're done. Bye.
Bye.